is May 9th, and this is a special planning board meeting for the MBTA public forum. And so there's only one agenda item on that meeting, which is the MBTA public open forum. It is, as I said, it is Thursday, May 9th, 2024, 7 p.m. We are doing this meeting via Zoom and only Zoom. So if you do have questions, please use the raise hand feature. And if you can't get that to work, I guess just speak up. But it'd be great. I think we would like to hold all questions till the end as we go through the slide deck on that. Did want to mention that this is being recorded and it will be live streamed on YouTube, and it is recorded and will be posted up there for future use. So with that, I did want to just do a quick introduction of the board. So I have, so board members, if you could just turn on your camera and just wave. But I do have myself, Chad Peck, chairman. Then we have Chris Montfort as our vice chair.
Hello.
We have Eric Diamond, our clerk. And then we have board member Melissa Mayo and our other board member, Gary Sullivan. And then we have our associate member, Christian Guston.
You want
it? Camera's off right now. We do have our town planner, Rich McCarthy, is here. And we are also blessed with Susan Jacobson is here as well from the Housing Trust. So with that, I will pass it over to Gary and Melissa and let them go through our wonderful slideshow that we prepared this evening.
Put it in there. And then get the.
I believe there's someone not muted, so I just wanted to point that out so that folks can hear. Rich, you're skipping ahead, my friend. Thank you. Okay, so the MBTA community zoning proposal that we're going to review tonight will also be presented in some form. It might be a little bit more brief, but it will be presented at town meeting, and residents will be asked to vote on this article. And so this presentation was created in preparation for the town meeting to explain what the MBTA community zoning is, what it means for Norfolk, and provide residents with the information required to make an informed decision on the warrant article at town meeting. We held a public meeting last week, and then we have this community forum tonight, and there will also be, as I mentioned, a live presentation at town meeting. All of the planning board meetings are public and recorded by NCTV, so if you have any friends and family that are interested in learning about MBTA communities before town meeting, but have been unable to attend the meetings, they can find them on NCTV or YouTube on NCTV's channel. And so this is our agenda. Oh, sorry, Rich, can you go back? Sorry. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to go through the MBTA communities law, what it means for Norfolk, the Norfolk MBTA overlap districts, like on a map, and we have some visuals to show you. And then there was a B1 zoning presentation a couple of years ago at town meeting, which was about, I think, 2.5 years in the making. And so Gary will go through the B1 zoning and how this differs from that. And then we have some frequently asked questions, just a few that we figured we would throw out there for everybody in case you're wondering, as some other people have been. And then we'll open it up to Q&A for any questions that you might have. Go ahead, Rich. You can go one more, please. So the MBTA communities law is a topic that is new to many folks in town. But if any of you follow along with the planning board meetings, we've been working on it for quite some time here in Norfolk. The new law was actually passed a few years back. It was passed by the Massachusetts House of Representatives, the state Senate, and signed into law back when Governor Baker was still in office. There are 177 communities across Massachusetts that are either MBTA or MBTA adjacent communities that are required to include multifamily development as of right. And as of right just means there can be no special permits or any other procedural impediments that would cause delays to the approval process. Thanks, Rich. You can go to the next one.
So I just want to pause for 1 second.
Sure.
And I don't think I could run in presentation mode and monitor the Zoom at the same time. So,
That's okay. This is fine.
okay. All right. I just wanted to let you know. Sorry.
I think it's fine. It looks fine for me, but I have a huge monitor. Is it okay for everybody else?
I can.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep,
Okay.
that's good.
Okay.
Thank you, Rich.
Yep. Okay.
So
Nope.
getting into
Did I jump ahead? Sorry. Go ahead.
All right, let's try this again. So the MBTA communities law, we have specific requirements for MBTA zoning. We had to have at least one district of reasonable size, which we now know is a minimum of 50 acres, and multifamily housing suitable for families, minimum gross density of 15 units per acre, and located not more than 0.5 miles away from the commuter rail station, a subway station, ferry terminal, or a bus station, and no age restrictions. So in Norfolk, we've had a lot of the development that we've had recently has been age restricted over 55 communities, which of course doesn't have an impact on the schools or anything like that. So that's one thing that we would not be able to do going forward. With this particular zoning, there would be no age restrictions allowed. And we'll go on to what does this mean for Norfolk? You can go ahead, Rich.
Okay.
Next one. Thank you. So what we decided, so we received a grant to fund an engagement with a third-party consultant, the Horsley Witten Group, to run different scenarios on a variety of options for locations in town that would meet the requirements put forth by the state, and also balancing that with what we've learned in the B1 committee and the master plan process, as far as what folks really wanted to see in town. So what we believed made the most sense for Norfolk was to split up the MBTA overlay districts. So one district, you saw in the requirements, we had to have it within 0.5 miles of an MBTA station. We only have to have one district in that area. So we've split that up, which we thought made the most sense. So using the guidelines that were provided, we were able to select parcels to include in the overlay districts that we've outlined. The guidelines have been revised a few times. We've also made a few revisions of our proposal over time. And at this point, we believe that we have a proposal that's thoughtful, it's balanced, with what residents have said that they want to see in town. We've heard time and time again that residents want a walkable downtown with small businesses or mixed use, which would be, a small business on the first floor and maybe some apartments or condos above. And so we did look into including the B1 district, which is the downtown district, for anybody that's unfamiliar with our zoning naming conventions. The B1 district is the downtown area. So we did look into including the B1 district as a mandatory mixed use district, but it wasn't approved by sorry, Rich, it's EOHLC now, Executive Office.
EOHLC. Yep, you did. Great job. Yep.
Thank you. It was not approved, and there are a couple of reasons it wasn't approved to be a mandatory mixed use district. So in our town bylaws, it's a little bit more restrictive than what they would have liked to see. So we require in the buildings downtown to be 35% commercial, 65% residential as the split, specifically in the B1 district. And in addition to that, we also require parking for non-residential units in our town bylaws. And so for those two reasons, essentially, we were not able to make a mandatory mixed use district. Something that I think is worth mentioning is that this is not a housing production mandate, it's a zoning mandate. And we're going to go through the district maps in just a second. But the parcels that we selected to be included in the MBTA overlay districts, they needed to meet specific criteria and allow for a total number of units to potentially be produced. So some of those parcels are already developed today, like the Meeting House Townhomes, for example, Boyd's Crossing, the Village at Norfolk, which is the new development that's right next to the train station, essentially, a couple, 2 doors down from that. And so we have included that we've been able to include those as part of our overlay district that are already built. So thank you, Rich. So I know this is not easy to read, but in case you saw this, I would just wanted to show you this first in case you've seen it on our website, on the town website. The orange outlined parcels are the ones that would be included in the downtown. So we're calling it the Town Hill Overlay District. It excludes the B1 parcels that have been previously identified as parcels that folks in town really want to be held for small business development, or the mixed use that I mentioned before, where it would be potentially condos on top or apartments, and then the small businesses down below. And then because the lots in the district had to be contiguous, which just means it's sharing a border, touching in some way. Some of the parcels outlined in orange have green diagonal lines on them. And all that means is that they're technically part of the district because we needed them to make it contiguous, but it was not included in our overall acreage that we needed because, for example, we have Town Hall on there, I believe, is one of them, the fire station, which are obviously not going to be redeveloped to be residential. So that's why they have the green diagonal lines there to say that, yes, it's part of the district, but that's not part of the acreage or the development that really, the zoning that would impact the development. And then just to show you, we've taken some screenshots. We thought some visuals would be helpful so that you can see, especially downtown, it's pretty low risk for redevelopment. We were able to use these particular locations as part of or these parcels, I should say, as part of our downtown district or the Town Hill district. They loosely kind of meet the requirements because, they're multifamily. They're not a typical what you would find in Norfolk. We have a lot of 4-bedroom colonials. These are different than that. They're more dense. They're smaller in size, smaller footprint. So we were able to get these, even though they're already built, we were able to get them included in the overlay district because they generally kind of meet the MBTA zoning. And then the next slide, Rich. Thank you. So there are a couple of other addresses here. So 18 Union, you've probably all seen it. It's the bank in Norfolk. There's a dance school there as well. That one is included in our overlay district for downtown in the B1 area. So Town Hill Overlay District. That again, already built, already has it's a mixed use building. So it has, the bank and the dance school on the bottom, apartments on the top. And then 20 Union Street, 114 Main Street, and 112 Main Street are all currently single family homes. So they could potentially be developed into multifamily. They are, they're already built. There's already people living there now, but just to be clear, they could be redeveloped into something that would fall in line with the MBTA zoning if those property owners decided to do that. And if this is approved at town meeting. And then the next slide, Rich. Thank you. So again, in order to have that line be contiguous, we went kind of across the train tracks. We wanted to be able to include the village at Norfolk. And so there's only really 2 lots there that are right next to it. And it makes sense to make the district, include those 2 parcels because that's what's, it's kind of aligned with what's already built there. But there are the mixed use building at 15 Rockwood is there, it's already there currently. That's what they're using it for. It's already in there. We're in discussions on the planning board with the owner. He's had a lot of different ideas, not sure what that's going to be yet. But we thought it would make sense to include that as part of the MBTA overlay district. And then the house that's directly next door is 19 Rockwood, single family home. We've heard of no plans of anybody, doing any work there to make a multifamily. But again, if this is approved, these are the parcels that could potentially be redeveloped. Next slide, thank you. We have a much smaller district over in Pondville. And it was really, we didn't have enough acreage near the MBTA station to support. There was a formula that we had. It was, not just the number of acres, but there was a number of units that we needed to be able to produce. And they had said the requirement was 750 units. Again, we do not need to build 750 units, but it was just the formula that we had to work with. It was, we had to have a certain number of acres and we had to have a certain number of units that could be built. And based on all the discussions during the B1 committee for that 2.5 years when they worked on the B1 zoning, and what we've heard in the master plan, folks in town really want to keep the small town look and feel and the village town center and, design guidelines essentially. And we want to keep the buildings shorter so that we don't have, sky rises around Norfolk, which wouldn't fit in at all. So we have included the second district so that we could do that basically. So we can split it all apart. We have enough acreage. We met the requirements for the number of units that could potentially be developed. But as we know, a lot of the parcels are already developed. And we chose Pondville because while it's not within a half a mile of the train station, it's situated in a convenient location for folks with access to Route 1, Route 1A. It's not a far drive from the MBTA stations in Foxborough and Norfolk. And some of the newer developments that are already over there kind of loosely fit what is, what we're aiming for or what the state is aiming for really for MBTA zoning. And then we have the pictures of each parcel on the following slide that Rich is about to pull up. So again, these are outlined in orange. That's the district. And we have the screenshots here of every parcel and what's on it currently. So all of the ones that you see in the photos there, like there's some light industrial at 21 Valley Street, 6 Hill Street, 8 Hill Street. And then there's some of the newer developments, which are on Valley Street. We have those residential townhomes. So it's kind of like 2 by 2 by 2 down that road. And then behind those is where on Hill Street, which is perpendicular to Valley Street, there's also townhomes right behind there as well in that same Pondville area. So those were able to be included in the Pondville overlay district. And then we do have a couple of these outliers here, 9 Hill Street, 4 Hill Street. Those are currently single family homes already built, but not to say they couldn't be redeveloped. And then over in Pondville, unlike in the Town Hill district, there are 3 empty parcels. There's nothing built on the ones that have the red dots over them right now. So there's a 1 acre lot, 5.73 acre lot, and a 3.53 acre lot. Those are currently vacant. So those ones there could potentially be developed. And again, they would be kind of right behind, if you could see kind of like where the 3.53 acre lot is, right below there is where the townhomes are. So it kind of fits in with that area aesthetically, visually as well. And then we have, so MBTA zoning and B1 zoning, as I mentioned, there was that long process and we had zoning changes in, I believe it was 2021. Gary Sullivan is going to go through this section. He was on the B1 zoning committee. So he can speak to this much better than I can. I was not on that committee. So Gary, if you wouldn't mind taking over for a couple slides, please.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, so like Melissa said, back in 2021, out on the KP High School fields, the town voted in our B1 zoning changes at town meeting. So there is some overlap, or there is some alignment between what the MBTA community laws are proposing, or the requirements that they have for proposing, and our B1 zoning bylaws. But there's 2 key areas where we would not be in compliance. And those really come down to allowing multifamily housing by right. And then, so just so we're clear, this is specific to the Town Hill overlay district, right? Which which sits in the B1 zone in its entirety. So multifamily housing is not allowed by right. The focus of the B1 zoning changes were to promote mixed use, commercial on the bottom, residential on the top. And as was discussed already, we tried to allowable to the state, and that was not granted. So we would be out of compliance there. We need to allow multifamily housing by right. The second is unit capacity, though our gross density actually exceeds by 1 unit per acre. The requirements are total unit capacity does not. Currently, we allow up to 450 units. That would have to be expanded to a minimum of 750 units. That does not mean that what is developed needs to have a minimum of 750 units. It just means that we need to allow minimum of 750 units. So effectively, we would be looking to allow 750 units up to. But again, we meet the gross density requirements. We do not require, we have no age restriction, and the proximity is clearly, compliant because it's right there in downtown. So we're not too far off, but these are the two things that we do need to change. So we have to revisit those B1 zoning bylaw changes and make further changes to allow multifamily housing by right and to increase that total unit capacity in order to be compliant. You can go to the frequently asked questions page there, Rich. I'll do my best on this one as well. So we've, everybody has we've fielded a lot of great questions so far, and we love that the community is interested in learning more about this and voicing their concerns. A couple, four of the key or most prominent questions that we get a lot is, and I think the first concern is this an expansion of the existing 40B chapter? And no, it's not. This is not a, it's not a mandate. It doesn't require us to increase the percentage of affordable units that that we are requirement, and it actually limits us to only requiring in this overlay zone 10% percentage of affordable units. So it's not really a forceful application of affordable housing or 40B expansion. It's really in line with just creating more residential space, family-friendly residential space along MBTA, station lines. What has the town done to push back on this? We did push back on some of the initial requirements. And we were not the only town to do this, but we were engaged early in this. The initial requirements simply wouldn't have worked for Norfolk. They were subsequently changed, based off of the feedback that, Norfolk and other towns have given us or had given the state. In addition, we have asked for, hey, can we do, could we keep our mixed use requirement? And that answer ended up being no, but we are, actively asking those questions and trying to put our foot down where we can. Another question is the town of Norfolk responsible for actually building and developing these plots? And this is not a production mandate, as has been mentioned before. It's just simply a zoning mandate. We need to provide this overlay zone in the town to allow a developer, if they were so inclined, to develop in this way. The onus is not on Norfolk, and it's not on the residents to promote that development. It's just to allow it. And then another good question is, what is the town required to build or expand town sewer infrastructure? We know that one of the limitations of developing in B1 is the lack of sewer, or the limitations of our existing sewer. This is not a mandate, or this does not put us in a position to need to build out sewer. It's, that is something entirely different. That's simply an infrastructure question, whereas this is a question of what does the zoning allow. So hopefully those answers are helpful, and I know you're going to have more questions, so at the end of this presentation, feel free to ask them. You can go to the next slide, Rich. Melissa, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, I'll take this. So, so what happens? This is an important question for folks to be informed. What happens if it is not approved at town meeting? So the planning board, just for anybody who's unaware, we as a board, we've done the due diligence. We've created what we think is a thoughtful proposal that meets the requirements and doesn't completely take over Norfolk or change the character of Norfolk, but it's really up to the town. The residents that attend the town meeting are going to be the ones who vote on this. And so we want to make sure that folks know, that maybe aren't following this as closely as we are on the planning board. We're following this very closely. But so we wanted to give a couple of examples of what would happen if this is not approved, just so that you are informed when making your decision, whatever that may be. So using Milton as an example, they were the first MBTA community to vote this down at their town meeting. So we've been following that. We've been following the news for Milton since they voted it down in February to see watch how it unfolds. So using them as an example, within days of voting it down, the AG announced that they were suing the town of Milton for noncompliance. Shortly thereafter, Milton was informed that they would be losing approximately $140,000 in state funding and grants. And so, these are just snippets that were taken from the news. There's other towns as well. We can go through that in a couple of minutes. There are other towns as well that are pushing back. The overwhelming majority so far has approved it. There are a couple that are pushing back, and they have their own, unique reasons. And just to show you on the next slide, Rich, please, just to show you, how the no vote would impact Norfolk with what we have kind of in the pipeline currently. So we do know, and, we've been made aware that we would lose eligibility to the MassWorks Infrastructure Program grants, Housing Choice Initiative, and Local Capital Projects Fund. And so we worked to come up with that current list. Thank you, Rich. The current list of, known impacts. Last one, thank you. The current known impacts and the potential impacts from a financial perspective. And so we know that we had $240,000 for the Norfolk Town Norfolk Town Center wastewater master plan. That was a grant through Housing Choice. We had $1.8 million granted to us for the Lawrence Street roadway improvements. That was through MassWorks. The Attorney General has issued a statement which clarifies that, communities who choose not to comply with the zoning will be subject to civil enforcement action. Aside from the lawsuit that we've already seen in Milton, it's kind of vague. I don't know what else. None of us do really at this time know what else it would be aside from, the lawsuit, just like that happened in Milton. We do know a couple of potential impacts, and I say potential because, I'll explain. So we received a congressional earmark for $959,000 for the town sewer expansion. We do not believe, though we do not have confirmation, I don't believe yet, Rich. We do not believe that we would lose that because that's not under the state. It came from our congressman through their funding. But we do have, we have other grants that we would lose potentially that we need to rely on to be able to work on that $959,000 project, if that makes sense. And I hope it does, but if it doesn't, feel free to ask questions when we open up for questions and we can explain that further. There was a grant that we requested $100,000 again for, additional funds for sewer expansion, specifically from MCI Norfolk. That was through MassWorks. It's pending. We don't have the other ones above the current known impacts, they've already been approved. So those would be a loss according to what the AG statement says currently. We're saying potential because, again, the congressional one that was outside, that was federal funding, but the $100,000, which hasn't been approved yet, if we were to be awarded that, it is through MassWorks. So we would lose that $100,000, which again is part of what we need for the sewer expansion. So really that project would probably go on hold, most likely. And then actually, Rich, I think there's one more before you get there. I just want to show if.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, my bad.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. So we updated this slide today with data from yesterday. So this is the latest number that we have here. 57 municipalities have approved the MBTA housing initiatives in their respective towns. 7 have resisted thus far. And the only one that we really know about in detail is Milton. The other ones, we'll be following those too, but it's been recent that they voted it down at their town meeting. So we'll have to follow and, learn why they decided, did they participate in the open discussion period, which we were actively involved with from the beginning. Maybe they weren't. Therefore, maybe the zoning that was finalized doesn't reflect what they need in their towns. We don't really know. But there's currently 57 that have approved and 7 that have resisted.
I will add that as of last evening, the town of Hopkinton did vote against the MBTA zoning. So there's a 8th town. We'll update the slide, but there was one more last night.
Well, thank you. And then does anybody on the planning board want to add anything else, or did we forget anything that you think would be helpful to note before we go into questions?
I can't think of anything, Melissa.
So we'll open up for questions.
I also want to put it out there. Susan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I'm good, thank you.
I did probably want to touch on a few points that weren't necessarily in the slide that's come up along the way. There was a question last week in terms of the voting threshold for this bylaw at town meeting. Unlike other zoning bylaws changes, which require 2/3 vote, town council has gone back to the board, the planning board that is, and will communicate to town meeting that it's a majority vote, even though there are some sections within the zoning bylaw as in totality to make this happen. It is a majority vote, so it's not the typical 2/3 vote for approval. I did want to say another couple points when Melissa mentioned about in terms of the comments that the towns were involved with before the final guidelines were published. Some of the more detailed requirements that the towns had to adhere to came from guidelines that were published by the Executive Office of Housing and Local Communities. One of the things that I know Norfolk and many other towns had requested was that the unit density requirement would be, they have a formula where they base it on 15% for communities with commuter rail, but in their guidelines, which would have meant for us 540 unit capacity, they create a floor, a bottom to round off to 750. So as you might here and there about the unit capacity, the 750 is something that they create a floor on in terms of what that unit capacity would be. In terms of the zoning, breaking it between the center of town and Palmville, the Town Hill area, when the bylaw was in development stage, the planning board wanted to make as minimal changes that we could to the existing underlying zoning. So by doing that, that meant we kept the lot size is the same, lot coverage was the same, the height stays at 3 stories, setbacks stay the same, parking requirements stay the same. So if you haven't read your warrant, you'll see that the acreage is 81 acres in total for both districts. That necessitated that being a little bit more area because we didn't go up as high and we didn't relax or reduce setbacks more than what's under the underlying zoning district. So hence we had to make a little bit larger area to get to those unit capacity numbers that were there. There has been discussion about which in terms of the inclusionary piece of some communities are looking at doing an economic feasibility analysis to go above 10%. The board early in the process had a bylaw that was going to address inclusionary townwide, not just specific to the MBTA zoning. From feedback from the public and advisory, the decision was to just have the 10% that corresponds with the overlay district. So the other numbers townwide remain the same. If the town wanted to, and I should say that before I say this, is that one of the considerations that the planning board, along with the Affordable Housing Trust, is going to be investigating is to look at other ways to incentivize additional affordable housing above the 10%, which was a recommendation that came from the housing production plan that was completed in 2023. So in terms of the affordable housing, it's not just this is the end of that story. They're going to be looking at in that further. And part of that work, there will be some economic analysis done by choice, because the idea is to try to find ways to incentivize additional affordable housing. So that will be a upcoming task to take a look at that. So I just want to let people be aware of that piece.
Yeah, I think too, for anybody that doesn't know what the inclusionary bylaw is, we have a certain number. So if you were building 10 homes in a neighborhood, one of them would be affordable. Just for, ease of math's sake. So the inclusionary bylaw is the number of affordable units per the number that you're building, essentially, which right now is a tiered model. And it's also worth noting, I think, that this zoning bylaw change, or from the state, did not actually include an affordability requirement. It is our own town bylaws that require that. So this wasn't even really focused on affordability. Back to Gary's, the frequently asked questions: is this 40B or is it something similar to 40B? It's really more about creating a diverse housing stock, and that the state did not require us to include affordable units. It is our own town bylaws that are in place that are requiring that we have a certain number of units that are affordable.
Don't see. Oh, wait a minute. Is that? Oh. No, I don't see any hands raised.
Well,
Oh,
There's one.
there you go.
yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good, all right. Well, my question or questions resolve around that density question. But as I understand what you said, the combined acreage between the B1 district and the C1 district is what, 80 acres, 81 acres? Is that what you said?
81 acres. Yep.
Okay, so the density requirement is what, 15 or 16?
15.
15 per acre. And the B1 district is how many acres? It's 3 years since I've been informed about all this stuff, so.
The density for
No,
B1?
then how many acres are in the B1 is what I'm asking.
Well, it doesn't include all of the B1 district, only part of it.
Well, fair enough. How many acres are included, Chad?
Rich, what was the split between the two?
Oh,
What,
so for the B1, it's 60 acres. I don't know off the top of my head the total area for the B1 is, but for the overlay district, it's 60 acres.
60? 60?
60, yep.
Which most of which is already built with the village at Norfolk, Meeting House. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, but there is a considerable number of empty lots that we know we've been pushing for development on for years. At any rate, with the available lots that are open for future development and the density requirement per acre, how many units would end up potentially at maximum in the B1? New units would end up potentially maximum in the B1 district. That's a question that I'm sure is going to get asked at town meeting, because that'll be, oh, you mean we're going to have 500 units in B1 or whatever the number turns out to be? You need to understand what that number is and be ready to defend it.
well,
At maximum, not that maximum would ever be reached perhaps, but nevertheless, people would want to know what that number is, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point, Walter. We should because it's really just, Rich, on the slides that we had, it's really just the ones that are the single family homes currently.
Mhm.
And then we know that, some of them too, it didn't take into consideration if there's I know one of those lots in particular has kind of like a pond out front. It's very wet out front, and
Right.
who knows if that would even be able to be developed, but we just had to go by the acreage of the lot.
Sure.
But we should have that number, Rich, because we can figure that out by the lot size.
Yeah,
We actually, no, we can get that number. Actually, I'm looking to see if I can grab it as you're talking. I guess as I'm looking for the file, I guess it's important to know a couple of things. One is that the area, which is the wetland areas are excluded, and any development that were to occur adjacent to wetland resources would have to comply with our local wetlands bylaw.
Mhm.
In addition to that,
Yeah.
any development would have to comply with Title V if it's not on a municipal sewer. So there's at the moment there's not many properties that are tied to municipal. Well, actually, there isn't any that are tied to that are adjacent to the sewer. So therefore, they would have to rely on Title V for their wastewater. So, and they have to comply with Title V. So they're
Yeah.
not exempted for it.
Yeah.
So in terms of real density, actual density, those do play a part in it in terms of.
Sure. Well, again, if you can figure that out and say, well, because of the wetland requirement, because of the Title V requirement, that cuts the number of the potential units down from, pick a number, 200 to 150 or whatever the number is. That would be useful to have to put in front of the town.
Yeah,
we could definitely put
yeah,
that together pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it's not even a lot of lots. We could figure that out.
Yeah,
Right.
sure. Okay, fair enough. And presumably, there's a similar set of
Same thing
counts
for
that could be done for the C1 district. So you say, oh, well, it really can only be, despite what the number allows, you can only put 200 units down there, whatever the number turns out
Right.
to.
Yeah, because I'm sure we can get the number what's allowed, and then but then the realistic number is like what you said. This.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we can definitely get the number. It's within the so in terms of those numbers, absolutely available. Like I'll just have to pull them from. So when we hired Horsley and Witten, that was one of the requirements in terms of doing the modeling of what that density is. So I have the numbers for both, so we can provide those for town meeting.
So I came in the middle of this, and my apologies for that, but it looked like there were two glitches that Gary was talking about. One was the density was 750 instead of what we said 450 that we were looking for, or that currently have in the zoning bylaw. And the other one was what? I forget what the other one was, but whatever
It
it
was
was.
allowing multifamily by right.
Yeah, by right, which of course you have to do to comply with this state requirement. But that doesn't seem to be a problem. It's the density issue. I think it'll get people to gulp unless we have the right numbers, unless you have the right numbers. Okay, I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you, Walter. That's actually a really good question. We should have that prepared for town meeting.
Yep. And then Walter, regarding the by right, the developer can choose to do mixed use if they would like to, but they have the ability by right to do all residential.
Yep.
All right. I think next was Peter Diamond.
Thank you. I think in slide 20, you showed current known impacts, and that included, I think, the Lawrence Street, Rich, maybe some other funding that
Yeah.
we've received in the past. And are we implying that they would take that money back?
No, just to clarify what the intent of that slide is. Good question.
Yeah.
So the Mass Works, the three grants that you see on the, you see the screen.
Yep.
All right. So Mass Works, Housing Choice, and Local Capital Projects Fund. The wastewater master plan that we received in 21 came from Housing Choice. So this was before the statute was, in terms of, well, actually it was 20. my apologies, but before it was in place. So it's just an example of where we did go to these grant sources that are tied directly to the statute, where we did utilize those for funding. The second one, the Lawrence Street, is another example. Mass Works, what we did get is directly tied to the statute being implemented. So it's just to illustrate that rolling forward, if we don't adopt housing choice, the MBTA zoning, we would, we wouldn't be able to go to those sources for grant funding.
I
So that
think to Peter's point though, like that,
you're not going to take it back. The money's already been spent.
but so current known impacts, right? The way that plays off, it
Mhm.
does. I think and Christy Burns says the same thing in chat. I think it's
Just the title of it.
yeah, if we can change that to, where, where we've gotten funding before that we would no longer be able to get funding from, if there's a 5-word version of what I just said.
Like previous funding that would be impacted.
But it's not impact. That's the trick. It's not at risk of being impacted because it can't be clawed back. So
Right.
Previous funding that would have
wording.
been.
Yeah,
Previous
that's-
funding would not be available in the future, right?
There you go.
not eligible. That's in the chat. I think that works well too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good catch. Yes.
Yeah, we can rework that. Sorry, I put that in there and it is misleading. Yeah, I was just trying to show where the funds came from. But in some towns, I listened to Rentham's meeting the other night about their MBTA zoning, and it sounded like in their meetings they don't actually rely on a lot of funding. They don't, or maybe they don't submit a lot of grants. Maybe it just wouldn't impact them as much. So we just wanted to show, we do actually rely on these grants, and this is how much. If this was a couple of years ago, that's what we would have lost, but it is misleading. So thank you for that point.
As a follow-up through the chair, please.
Yep.
The rail trail funding, Rich, I thought we were a little concerned that might be in jeopardy. Is that not true? Or is it in jeopardy?
We are.
The Metacomet Greenway.
That would be a
So
good example for the people if that were true.
we are, I guess I would say, generally speaking, yeah, I am concerned. It's not directly tied to this, so that I don't, it's kind of that's one of those unknown ones. I guess it's probably in some ways it's similar to Milton. They got their grant pulled, which wasn't tied to any of the, directly, to the statute. So we don't know for sure. But it is, to your point, it is a concern though, because I mean it's $1.2 million of
Right. We all want the rail trail. So
for the rail trail. So yes, generally concerned for sure, but I don't, I can't say it's absolutely
We can put that as something we're concerned about, but don't have full clarity on, right?
yeah. No, I think it's a good point. I do agree. There are I thought I had the slide presentation. It might be worthwhile for town meeting because there was an announcement of a series of multiple other grant sources, which not directly tied to the statute, but the compliance or non-compliance. So if you were non-compliant, you would essentially, you wouldn't get penalized, but it would be a 0. But if you were compliant, you could get bonus points on grants. So in terms of competitive grants, that can mean a lot. So for example, in some cases, you could be up to 5 points. 5 points on a competitive grant could either put you in or out. So I think that might not be a bad slide to show people. So it's a little, and those grants are ones that the town would be going towards in the future. So we wanted to acquire open space and try to get a grant to fund that. That's one source. There's the municipal vulnerability program. That's another one that's tied. It's again gets scored on it that we would want to go to fund some of our stormwater projects that we'll need to be working on going forward. So there are some other ones. There is some brownfield redevelopment money that's also tied, albeit, it's a scoring thing, but could be impacted by it as well.
Thank you, Rich. One more, if you could go to slide 11.
Sure. Slide 11.
It's where you show my family's home.
Yes.
I can see it on the screen.
You see it? Did I
No.
share it?
You're not sharing.
Oh, my apologies. Hold on. There you go.
Just a small detail, the house depicted at 114 Main Street is actually the home that's at 112 Main Street. And the Cape House, the white Cape House depicted at 112 Main Street is actually my childhood home at 114 Main Street.
Oh, so reverse those two then.
Yeah, that's just a small detail.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
And on that note, that's where the pond is. And you mentioned that wetlands acreage is excluded. Is it excluded from the acreage required by MBTA? Or is it also excluded from development of that property? So for example, my family's property is 1.5 acres, and let's say there's a 1/2 acre pond. Does that mean only 1 acre is eligible for the 18 units per acre?
So the density would be counted on the total land area. In terms of if this bylaw were to pass, in terms of the unit capacity, the wetlands is excluded.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Sue? Susan Jacobson, you were next.
Yep. I just wanted to make a suggestion that instead of waiting for someone to ask the question that Walter brought to our attention about what is the maximum number, I think that if we have that in the presentation and we present it instead of waiting to be asked that question,
Yep.
that may be very helpful.
Yep.
Just a suggestion.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Just a note, and it's a good point. It's a mathematical maximum, not an actual maximum.
We can say that.
Still going to add up to the 750 though. Correct?
The mathematical model does, the actual, not necessarily. Because again, you have to account for wetlands where there's wetlands. You have to account for Title V.
Yeah.
So Title V
Yep.
regulations require setbacks from stormwater systems, from buildings, etc.
Yep.
So when you add all those layers together, the actual is not going to be the theoretical. It's an important point. They look at it in terms of the state. When I say they, is take the town center as a blank sheet of paper. So the municipal properties, those are excluded. The wetlands are excluded. The rest of it is considered the area where this model gets analyzed on top of.
Rich, I don't know if I'd use the word actual, maybe more of a realistic model number, based upon those conditions, maybe some in that terminology. We'll have to think about that, but I wouldn't want to use the word actual. Because there's like you said, there's the theoretical model that Horsley Witten did, but then what we need to present, what Walter suggested, which is a great suggestion, is more about what do we think realistically we can get out of it.
Yeah.
So.
We can do that as a asterisk.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Not a promise. Not a promise.
Yeah. And the only reason why I say is every time I present a number, then it becomes a real number.
It's a guesstimate.
All right. We can. I know it's not nitpicky, but that believe me.
It's all Rich's
Yeah.
fault. We know that.
Yeah. All right. Well, those are very helpful comments and questions too in terms of getting ready. And I will say that actually, honestly, all of the process up to this point has been very helpful from people who participated. It's good questions, good to ask. So I really, you know, whether this passes or not next Wednesday that's to be determined. But at least I feel like there's been really good questions that were asked by people. I do greatly appreciate those.
Yeah. And every time we get the questions, we can put them into the next presentation, which is what we've done so far. But no, that number, that 750 is really, it's confusing. So we can figure out what
It
it
is.
actually
Yep.
is.
Yep.
Okay,
Any other questions from anybody? And speak up if you can't raise your hand in Zoom. Just go ahead and go off of mute and speak up. Okay, I don't see any. Okay, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Like Melissa said, you know, these are great, and it makes every time we present this better. And so our final time to present will be at town meeting, and it's just going to make that presentation even better than this one was. So appreciate everyone's time. This was the end of our agenda for tonight. It was one agenda item. So I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.